Again, welcome everybody to today's Michigan Chemistry Roundtable with United States Senator Gary Peters. My name is John Delmas and I'm the Executive Director of the Michigan Chemistry Council. And as the MCC, we are partnering today with the colleagues at the American Chemistry Council and the National Association of Chemical Distributors to hold this roundtable with Senator Peters, as well as a number of businesses from our industry in Michigan. This has been certainly a challenging year for everyone, as evidenced by the means now by which we, of course, can converse. But we're so grateful, of course, to have the partnerships with our elected officials, their staff, and other industry professionals, even throughout this time, that allows us to work towards solutions together. And that's what we hope to, again, continue that work today. So, Senator, we're going to have some participants that are going to be visible and sharing a little bit later, but I wanted to recognize all the companies, at least to my knowledge, that are participating in the roundtable from across the state. And that would be Amway in Ada, Anderson Development Company in Adrian, BASF with 9 sites across Michigan, most predominantly in Wyandotte, the Chemours Company, Corteva, which is up in Midland, and Harbor Beach as well, the Dragon Corporation, which is based out of Farmington Hills. I believe someone from Enbridge is on the call, from Stockbridge, Hemlock Semiconductor up in Saginaw County, PPG in Adrian, US Ecology with a number of sites across Wayne County, the Vinyl Institute, and then the Vacher Chemical Corporation, which is in Adrian and Ann Arbor. And I may have missed a few others. I'll try to grab those from the participant list later, but that's just a little flavor of who can make it. Again, appreciate everyone's time in this holiday, this sort of week still. We're so excited that Senator Peters has taken the time to join us out of his busy schedule. So we want to get right into, of course, his comments and then the back and forth. I did want to recognize US Ecology as a sponsor for our series of reactions policy roundtables. And I also wanted to provide on the next slide just some support information if you're having any technical difficulties, how to get that assistance, as well as the chat function. We'll be monitoring for questions for the few panelists we have or for the senator. And then finally, the contact information for myself at the Michigan Chemistry Council and Kristen, our staffer, who's helping to organize the future policy roundtables. So we're going to have a varied format, including a number, again, of industry representatives that will provide some thoughts and discussion. Before that, if he's on the call, I wanted to turn it over to before we hear from Senator Peters, I want to turn over to American Chemistry Council President CEO Chris John to introduce the senator. And Chris, we have you live. Is he a panelist? Yes. Can we make Chris John from ACC as a panelist to be able to give those remarks? And then you have to unmute yourself, Chris.
Yo, unmuted. Now we're okay. Nick, can you hear me now?
We can hear you. You need to start your video as well.
Okay, I've got the video on, so I'm not quite sure why it's showing up, but no, as long as you can hear me, nobody needs to see me anyway, if that's okay. Because I know we want to get to the senator, and that's really what's important about today. So first of all, thank you, John, so much for setting this up and allowing us to partner with you and having this important conversation with the senator today. I really appreciate your leadership here in Michigan. And Senator, it's good to see you, albeit not in person. We want to thank you for your time and your leadership, particularly in helping CFATS get through the Senate. And I'm sure our members are going to be interested in hearing about how that all came together and what the outlook is for House passage. You well know how significant the industry presence is in Michigan, employing 21,000 people and supporting nearly another 30,000 jobs as well. And we're excited that you'll be hearing from our joint members here today. So I mentioned your leadership in moving us ahead on CFATS. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the industry's leadership in responding to the COVID crisis. And I hope that you know all this. And at this point, I'll just be very brief. But, nearly 3/4 of members are involved in either creating the feedstock or intermediate chemicals that are used to manufacture the products that lead the fight against COVID. So biocides, bleach, soap, hand sanitizer, disinfectants, blood bags, IV bags, tubing, swabs, test kits, ventilators, all of that stuff. Our member, N95 masks, gowns, goggles. Our members are either making the supplies that go into that or actually manufacturing it themselves. And it's just, I know John would agree with me that it's just a tremendous time to work for the industry at such an important time for our country, and very proud of what our members have done. And we've worked hard at the American Chemistry Council. We've helped supply our own members with 2 million masks so that they can stay at work, as all of our members are essential critical infrastructure, as you well know, and continue to operate during this time of crisis. But again, Senator, thank you so much for your leadership on CFATS and so many other issues. And really excited to have you here today with us. And so I really want to just turn it over to you and for your comments.
Great. Well, thank you, Chris. Thanks for being on the call here. Thanks for the intro and the update on what's happening in the industry. John, thank you as well for putting this together here from the Michigan perspective. And I look forward to the roundtable, taking questions, but also just hear from you as to what's happening in the industry, how we can be helpful, how do we work together. As is clear, as is mentioned, the chemical industry is critically important to us here in Michigan. The number of good paying jobs that you provide here is something that we want to continue to support and find ways that we can expand as well going forward. And your success is directly related to the success of the whole state and the people who live here. So I guess I'll start my comments with a big thank you. Thank you for what you do each and every day, and look forward to working closely with you in the years ahead as well. In terms of some of the opening comments, and I'll try to be brief so we can have a give and take here, but I have been clearly actively involved in the COVID response from my position as the ranking member on Homeland Security Committee. As you know, that means I oversee FEMA, and so we're regularly on the phone with FEMA, and in the early days, several times a day, with the administrator, all of the key folks at FEMA, as we were really scrambling to make sure that we could get the personal protection equipment that we needed first and foremost to keep our health providers safe during the initial outbreak. We had critical shortages across the country that we had to deal with, and working closely with FEMA to make sure it was coming in to Michigan here as one of the early hotspots. And that also included testing supplies, which were a scarce commodity given the magnitude of the problem that we had. And we have to continue to work to make sure that we have the supplies necessary for that. I'm happy to say we're in a better position than we were then. We still got a long ways to go, because now as we open up the economy with your folks, your employees, obviously working, but as we just generally open up the economy all through the state and around the country, we have to make sure that employees are kept safe, customers are kept safe, people feel comfortable going out, because it's one thing to open an economy, it's another thing to make sure you actually have customers that go out and patronize these businesses. So we have to do both. One area that have always focused on and continue, and now we clearly need, and you obviously will play a big role, and folks in the industry, and that's supply chain issues. That really we saw some real problems with the supply chain. We are outsourced to a considerable extent on critical, whether it's drugs or medical equipment. I actually put out a report last year from the Homeland Security Committee, a minority report, on our concern about drug shortages and the fact that most of the precursors that go into the drugs that we use are all manufactured overseas, over 80%. Most of that from China, that we are just too dependent on China. And from a national security perspective, that was problematic, is what we brought out. In a homeland security perspective, given the fact that or I should actually in the report and in talking about the report, I'd say when there is a pandemic, we're going to be in a very precarious situation. Little did I know, it was just a few short months after that, here we are in the middle of a pandemic. And what we found in that supply chain, and we find this in supply chains through manufacturing as well, which we can talk about, is that an industry has become very adept at being highly efficient and having just-in-time deliveries and creating very efficient supply chains. But then there's the question of resiliency. How resilient are you when you have major disruptions or major demands, which of course is what we're having with medical supplies right now, and drugs. And how do we build in that resiliency? How do we bring more of that production onshore to have it here in the United States, creating good paying jobs? And so we can talk about some of the legislation I'm working on in that area, but I'd really love to hear your thoughts too as to how do we bring that. And I understand obviously cost has been driving a lot of this stuff offshore, but we've got to look at it from a security perspective as well. I do that every day in the other committee that I serve on, or one of the other committees I serve on, which is the Armed Services Committee and on the industrial chain, which is very important for us here in Michigan. And we understand fully that when you're talking about defense, national defense and defense industries, you have to make sure they're here in the United States. The example I like to give is that we do not order from China U.S. Navy warships. We don't buy our warships from China. We make sure we have shipyards in America that can make warships for the Navy. We're blessed to have one on the border with Michigan, right in the Wisconsin-Michigan border, Marionette Marine, for example, that builds the Littoral Combat Ship, and we'll be moving into future projects as well. Those are skilled workers we have in our country. Other defense related to that in Michigan and Ohio and other places is where the design and the building of the M1 Abrams tank, for example, we don't buy our tanks from China. We make them here. We make those here in the United States. And so I want to look at those kinds of products broadly. We should be looking at that in a broad sense, and certainly medical products, whether it's critical drugs. The fact that most of our antibiotics are all made overseas is a real problem. And certainly it's a problem for the Department of Defense as well, but it's one that is related to the COVID crisis, even though we're dealing with a virus. There are secondary infections associated with that virus. How do we make sure we have adequate supplies of antibiotics, for example, in that program? But as I continue to lean in manufacturing, and you're a big part of that, a huge part of that, I've also introduced legislation here recently that I've been working on for some time with many of you, and I know we've talked to the National Council as well, is to create a National Institute of Manufacturing in the country. That will really focus on manufacturing, because I don't believe we can be a great country if we don't make stuff. And all of you make stuff, you make really important stuff for the whole economy. But how do we make sure we're making that here in our country, and how do we help manufacturers? Especially given the fact that roughly 75% of manufacturers in this country are small companies with less than 20 employees. But that's a very vibrant, a very dynamic part of the manufacturing ecosystem. And I'm sure many of your suppliers and in the supply chain are those folks that you need to have operating. And so this concept has been worked out, working with manufacturers across Michigan and the country, working with other folks. The University of Michigan's Business School, for example, has been very involved in thinking through how do we reorganize the federal government in a way to be a larger assist to folks in the chemical industry and other manufacturers. And that really uses the model of the National Institute of Health, which is a very successful federal program focused on the health of Americans, but working closely with the private sector and figuring out where are the gaps in research and development, other kinds of things, or skilled workforce, particularly manufacturing. How do we develop the skilled workforce that all of you need to be working in your facilities? How do we make sure that pipeline is intact? So using that model is the National Institute of Manufacturing. Having a chief manufacturing officer that speaks for manufacturing, we're coordinating all of the different programs we have. We have 58 programs that deal with manufacturing in the federal level, spread out across 11 federal agencies. That makes no sense. That would not be in your org chart in your individual companies. You would have a more focused, consolidated effort. You reduce redundancies. You use taxpayer money much more efficiently. You have a focused goal. All of those things need to be accomplished in terms of manufacturing. And if I think about how other countries approach us in the global way, and many of you are global companies, you look at other countries that have really thought through this I think in a comprehensive way. Countries like South Korea and Germany, for example, are countries that really understand the power of manufacturing in their economy and work to really support that and to work hand in glove with their local industries. And that's my intent as well. So I'll stop there, but I'd love to hear more about your thoughts on that kind of approach, what your thoughts are. I've worked with many of you on it, but love to hear what's going on in the industry, as well as answer any questions that you may have. So with that, John, I appreciate it. Thank you again for hosting this event.
Yeah, thank you, Senator. That's a fantastic update. Of course, it seems like years and years of work on COVID, although we're really talking about months. And so the work by you and your staff and everyone, frankly, to to get us even to this point is really appreciated. We are looking forward to talking about some particular topics, and we've got, again, some panelists that are going to tee those up. And I first want to introduce Doug Lee with the NACD. And Doug's, take it away.
Good morning, Senator. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Great to see you, Doug.
Good to see you as well. I'm Director of Legislative Affairs at National Association of Chemical Distributors. I always like to say, easiest way to describe it is we're kind of the middlemen between Chris and ACC's members and the end users of about 750,000 different end users. We employ about 80,000 people across the country. We have many members with facilities in Michigan. But the topic that I wanted to bring up this morning was our favorite topic over the last few years, Chemical Facilities Anti-Terrorism Standards Program, otherwise known as CFATS. Seems to be the topic that never seems to go away. I feel like I've been talking about it, doing Groundhog Day for the last few years. But thanks to your help and your staff, and I'd be remiss if I didn't say that Chris and Jeff and your committee staff have done a fantastic job working with this. I know your counterpart hasn't been the easiest one to find to deal with. Let's go with that nice way of saying it. Well, and so with the introduction of the 3-year plus, I think there's a couple extra days added to that, of S 4148, excuse me, and that getting passed by the Senate last week. I just wanted to get your impression and kind of your insight into how do you think the House is going to handle this when they get back in session, knowing they only have about 2 or 3 days to actually bring it to a vote, be it UC, so just bring it to a straight vote, kind of what you're hearing and what your prospects for that narrowly getting by once again, as it seems to do right before expiration every single time.
You're right about that, Doug, that this is like Groundhog Day. I think that was a good analogy of what we're dealing with. So I want to get past Groundhog Day as much as you do. And it's an important program. We want to get it right. And I know your members have been engaged in it. And we have to, right now we're just kicking the can down the road. And working with Chairman Johnson and actually, I have a very good working relationship with Chairman Johnson. Politically, I think you'll all agree we're very different politically, but we always seem to find a way to come together and find common ground, and I appreciate that with him. But this was challenging, no question about that, because he had some very strong views on this.
We started veering off to the voluntary program and doing away with the program at one point with the president's proposed budget. I think that frightened us a little bit.
Yeah, I was concerned as well, but we were able to get the veering back, and then, as you know, the chair proposed a much longer extension, but there are folks who want to have a shorter one, so we can really get to work to create that sense of urgency to get something done. As you know, when you have a deadline in Washington, usually everything gets done like the 2 months before the deadline. So if you set a longer deadline, is that much longer before the kind of work goes into it? So it's not a bad thing to have deadlines, but you like to have enough of a runway that we can put the kind of substantive work. So as you know, we settled on a 3-year extension, which passed the Senate and is now over in the House. You're right, the clock is ticking over there. We've had ongoing conversations with our counterparts in the House. So I'm reasonably confident that they're going to accept the 3 years and do a UC similar to what we did to get it done, because they have 3 days to do it, I think, when they go back into session. So it's going to be a pretty short window, but it's my understanding right now that should not be a problem, that we're going to get it passed and do the 3-year extension. But then we can't, I don't want to be in a situation where we wait for 2 years and 9 months to be looking at it again, that we really need to start in the next session. That's my commitment in the next session. Either, depending on what happens, I hope to be I hope to be chair, but we'll see what happens in the election. But it's certainly, we want to keep working on that as we right off the bat, as something so that we can get done to work with you to do that. So there's some outstanding issues related to labor involvement, to whistleblowers. There are a variety of things that we need to work through. But I've always had the sense that we were close. But I
was going to say in December, or was it November, October? It's all running together now. Late last year, let's go with that. It seemed that we were very, very close. I think it was about a 5-year comprehensive, and then it seemed the talk just kind of stalled out and it was never revisited.
Right, right, right. But we were close. Close. Although I've learned in this job, when you say close on legislation, that there's a different definition of that versus the real world. But still, nevertheless, we were close. So I'm optimistic, but we got to get people just focused on it after we get this passed. Clearly, this year, the rest of the year is tough. Plus, all the focus on what's going on still with the COVID crisis and with the economy just generally. I'm concerned about how quick the economy is going to recover, and one of my central focus in all this, one, to keep people safe and make sure that families have the resources they need to get through it. But part of that is to make sure our small businesses survive. We've got to make sure those small businesses survive. And everybody on the call here knows, if they don't survive, any kind of economic recovery is going to take a whole lot longer. They're really the engine of growth that hire a lot of folks and have had to lay people off now. How do we get them back up on their feet and running? So that has to be our total focus in the next few months to get back up going. And then in the next Congress, with this 3-year extension, we can then focus on these other very important issues. But we just have one now of kind of an existential issue we're dealing with right now.
Couldn't agree more. NACD members are 98% small business, so we're right there with you.
Right.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Doug. Appreciate it. Good to work with you.
You as well.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And next we want to turn to Greg Flum, who's Vice President General Manager of BASF. He works specifically with the sites in Wyandotte and Southfield, and has a number of the businesses that operate in the material science realm specifically. So Greg.
Thank you for being with us here today, Senator Peters, and great to see you again.
Likewise, Greg. Good to see you.
Yeah, our last visit together was there in Southfield as we were going through some of our labs, and you got to see how we create chemistry. Yeah,
I enjoyed that. I'd love to come back out sometime.
Love to have you when the time is right.
Right,
for sure.
Right.
And I'm here today representing our 9 sites in Michigan that BASF has. We have around 2,200 employees, really across the state, from coast to coast. So I want to answer your question first around how is our business doing in this time.
Excellent.
And I just call it BASF through the COVID period. But first, being part of the critical infrastructure, we saw some huge demand shifts. For example, some of our plants make food packaging, and we saw that shift when people were, instead of getting food via a restaurant chain, we're now going through the retail environment, grocery stores, et cetera. And so we saw one of our plants have a huge demand shift to go to food packaging. Another plant we had makes medical devices, medical tubing, materials that actually go into ventilators and different technologies that support the hospital and medical environment. Of course, you can imagine that facility had huge demand upward. Likewise, we had the other side, which is especially mobility-related businesses really went to a point of we had to shut some plants down for a short period of time, both aerospace as well as the automotive side. So a lot of impact there on our employees, and we were able to retain all employees and continue paying all employees. As we look forward, though, this becomes a challenge: is how do we keep that model going? So we're really supportive of finding smart ways to get the economy back on track and try to get some of this manufacturing back in line. And my question comes from the kind of third category, I would say, through the COVID period, is we converted our production in a couple areas into producing hand sanitizer and surface sanitizer. I got a call from the CEO of the Henry Ford Hospital. I'm on the board there in desperation. So the first thing we did is we opened up our warehouse and loaded the trucks with all of our masks and face shields and gloves and gowns, everything that we could spare out of our requirements and help them at least get through that initial period. The one thing they really were challenged on is the sanitizer side. And I do want to thank you and the rest of the federal government for, freeing up and allowing facilities such as ours that have great manufacturing practices to not have to comply fully with all the FDA normal requirements. That enabled us to produce tens of thousands of gallons of hand sanitizer, and our first shipment went into the Henry Ford Health System. It was also shared across the state of Michigan, as well as we ended up having enough to support other states around us. So thank you for the support there. That ties into, though, the point you said around the pharmaceuticals and how do we get this domestic manufacturing case back? I'd just like to get your thoughts on, do you see that applying also to the rest of the PPE, the rest of the critical medical infrastructure components that are there? Because I felt bad. We opened our warehouses, we gave all these materials, but then we were trying to resource, and of course finding that the only place to get it is out of China. Mm-hmm. And very luckily, I'm part of the world's largest chemical company, so we have quite a few resources, and we could leverage that. But for the average business that doesn't have that reach, that doesn't have that capability, that domestic component is so important. So just like to get your thoughts, beyond the pharmaceuticals, how do you see that play out for the rest of the PPE?
I think it's a great question, Greg, and you're right. It is broad. It's drugs and all medical equipment generally that we deem as essential, and where we need to have that resiliency, more resilience in a crisis. So you mentioned mask. We know that nearly all the mask production was in China, but one particular area that was an issue and continues to be an issue was just the swabs that are used for testing that folks use to put in their nose to get the nasal the sample from your nose. There's only one manufacturer in the United States that makes that. They're made primarily in China and other places, but there's one place. And so, and in a pandemic, if China's the only place to go, every country in the world is going to China. It's not just us going to them trying to get the product. So, that's why I wanted onshore to do that. And so we have to identify what are those critical elements. And we also understand, which we found out in very stark terms, that the national stockpile is inadequate to deal with a pandemic of the scope that we've seen. And the unfortunate thing about all of this is that we know there will be another pandemic. That's just part of human existence, that these things get out in the populations all through our history, and sometimes they've been really horrific. Think of bubonic plague, other things that have occurred. So we've got to make sure we're prepared to deal with these kind of biological emergencies that happen and respond quickly, and then have the resources. And I'm also concerned. Those are natural biological attacks, and I'm on the Emerging Threats and Capabilities Subcommittee. I'm the ranking member on the Armed Services Committee, and there could be folks who especially with advanced synthetic biology and other things that could use these as weapons. I mean, we need to be prepared. Bottom line, this is a homeland security, national security issue. So we want to identify where, and one thing that I have found through this is that it's hard to get the information, exactly what is being made in the United States. A lot of companies see that as proprietary information, don't give it. So we don't really have an idea of what is actually made in our country until there's a crisis, and we can't do that. So we have to identify what are those things that we're going to have, where is it made, and where are there gaps, and then how do we incentivize bringing more of that production back onshore. And many of your companies would be part of that to bring some of that onshore, and then we can talk through, and these will be future conversations, how do we incentivize that? What sort of things are going to be necessary to bring it on? Because we understand basic economics involved in it, but that basic economics do not consider the factor of resiliency. It's about efficiency and just in time, but on critical healthcare, it's resiliency. When it comes to building Navy warships, that's resiliency. You have to have it in the United States, and you need to help that manufacturing occur. So Senator, I would, yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, sir. On that point, I'm kind of getting you some information. We sent a letter to the administration over a month ago now that identified over $1 billion worth of product, particularly PPE focused, that is hung up in China because of the tariff situation. So we have done some homework in this area. We'd be happy to share that information with you. And as you go down this road, we're happy to work with you on that. As you said, so many of our members are global, including production in China. We need to have a thoughtful conversation about how that works going forward. So we'd love to help you on that.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, we'll need that involvement and to do it. And because when we're talking about supplies, with the stockpile, we can't stockpile enough. You got to have enough to get through the major hump, but ultimately you got to have a secure supply chain. So and the supply chain then ramps up. And even if you have the capability to ramp up, how do we have that in reserve? So you don't necessarily need it now, but you'll be able to ramp up much more quickly. And you have a stockpile to get us through to the point where our national suppliers or domestic suppliers can do that. And you're going to be paying. You obviously will play a key role in that, as well as the other issue with how do we think through these supplies with the stockpile too, because some of these all have a shelf life, and you can't just put it away forever. And you got to bring it out of the stockpile, bring it back into the market, and put that out in the market, then replenish what you're sending out with fresher stuff that's going to last longer in the stockpile. That's quite a mechanism that we have to work through, and that's something we have to work through in a coordinated fashion with industry. So your input into how does that work? How would you access stockpile, put it in the market while you're backfilling it? All those kinds of questions.
Thank you much.
I think, Greg, do you want to?
I just want to say thanks to Senator Peters, and for sure BSF is also available if you're looking for input, along with Chris's offer. So thank you so much for being here today again.
That'd be great.
Yeah, I think David Wilhoit, President and CEO of Wacker Chemical, if you want to take over, I think you could probably speak to some of the same conversation here. So.
Yeah, thank you, Governor. Senator, for welcoming this discussion. I'm not sure how much you know about Wacker, but I want to apologize for not extending an invitation to have you come down and meet with us. We've been in Michigan manufacturing over 56 years. We have close to 550 people down in Adrian and Ann Arbor. We run the gamut of manufacturing. You probably use our product 10 times a day without knowing it. Everything from fabric softener to shampoos, personal care, paints, adhesives, construction. But one of the things we've really been able to shine is in the COVID battle. We're an antiviral mask. Actually, remdesivir, which gets a lot of publicity nowadays, we're one of the active ingredients in that. Medical supplies, ventilators, respirators, and similar to what Greg mentioned, we've donated thousands of liters of hand sanitizer to the local community and to the Michigan State, as well as several thousand KN95 masks as well. You'll be hearing more of us as we're looking at building an innovation center in the greater Ann Arbor area, looking to break ground later this year, over $6 million investment, as well as keeping and bringing in 300 new high-tech jobs into the area.
Excellent. Super.
One of the things you mentioned that really resonated with me, and I'm sure another person on the call from Hemlock would as well, you talk about the value of keeping the critical supply chain for security as well as the manufacturing in the US. One of the areas that is important to us is polysilicon. Hemlock has a facility in Michigan. We have built a multi-billion-dollar factory in Tennessee. It's critical on a couple things. One is, of course, solar, which by far the majority is being consumed making solar panels in China, getting access to that market so we can really participate. It was part of the phase 1 deal with China, but actually zero has been purchased since that time. So making sure that when we do have agreements, they follow through. But the other main product segment is going into semiconductor devices. As you talk about, the tanks and the aircraft carriers, and those run on the high-tech technology coming out of semiconductors, and semiconductors are based upon polysilicon and high-quality polysilicon. There's a strong concern with lack of access to the markets for solar, which is a companion product, that this technology would be lost in the US. So anything you can continue to do to help support access to China, as well as incentivize using US components and materials for manufacture, be it through incentives on the solar side, but also, US content provisions in contracts from the government and such. That would really be important for companies like Wacker as well as Hemlock to keep this lead in technology for this critical material. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How can you support us on that?
Well, I think we have to discuss that further. Exactly what kind of support is necessary to do that. I know a lot of it's some economics associated with it, but it's a part of that broader discussion as to what are those critical supply chains that we have to maintain, and what is necessary. It is a broad. In your point, it's a broader net, and particularly given the fact that as we move to advanced technologies, the components you talk about are central to that. And as warfare changes dramatically and we get into autonomy and advanced weapon systems, all empowered by AI, we're going to need to be thinking about what is that defensive supply chain as well in a very broad sense. So I'll look forward to working with you, but and some of that may be related to subsidies and other things that may be necessary. But we gotta start the broad conversation and then drill down into the specifics.
Well, thank you for your support, and we'll be reaching out to help educate you so you can help us with this fight.
Yeah, I look forward to that, and I want to come to your facility, so we'll make that happen too.
All right, thank you, sir.
And our last panelist, I want to bring in Mark Kramer from Anderson Development, who is actually pretty near to with Wacker. They're very familiar and partner a lot at the local level. Mark's company is different in terms of the footprint and things they produce, but Mark, you want to share a little bit of your perspective and question for the Senator?
Sure, thank you, John. Yeah, thank you for taking your time with us, Senator Peters. I'm guessing you may have never heard of Anderson Development Company. Probably most people haven't. We're a smaller company. We've got about 130 people. Our headquarters and manufacturing is located in Adrian, about 20 minutes north of Wacker's site right now. And we've been there over 50 years. With a lot of our industry, I think we're common in that most people, maybe they haven't heard our name, but they're almost guaranteed to have used our products. And like the other companies here, I think we've been running all the way through the COVID crisis, trying to do our part. I can't say that this is a good time for us to do business, but we've got a job to do, and we've got a role we need to play as part of the critical infrastructure. I completely agree with Greg's comments about the demand shift. We make anti-fog coatings for inside of safety goggles, inside of masks, that type of thing. Food packaging materials, an intermediate for one of the drugs to fight COVID. Those types of materials have really been busy. Other materials like the resins, which we use which are used for coating, so like the aluminum wheels on your car, quite possibly start with our resin. That coating system cuts the carbon footprint of protecting that wheel by somewhere between 40 to 60%. That, in automotive, that's been a little rougher business for a lot of people. And hopefully we're starting to see some of that come back as people are getting the plants back up online. I guess I'm pretty excited about what you're working on in terms of the National Institute for Manufacturing. I've felt for a long time this is a real challenge for us. Especially as a smaller company, we do compete all over the world. About 30% of our sales are actually offshore, and we have been the kind of the poster child for onshoring about how do we make it here but then export it somewhere else. Mm-hmm. I think some people might seem a little silly right now thinking about this, but one of the challenges we had before the COVID crisis started was just finding the right people that we need for manufacturing to really be able to grow. And I see that as this crisis will pass, we will move on, things will get better. But as you work through that and work through in terms of the national manufacturing strategy, I think it's completely the right thing to do. How do you envision that working in terms of getting the right people, the skills that we need to do that? I guess is the first part. I guess the second part of the question is really with respect to your work on the Armed Services Committee. That's been one of my areas of interest for a long time. Is there a way to use that to create a runway so as people come out of the armed services? We've found our experiences when we hire people in, especially on the operations level, the discipline that they've learned and the skills of the trades that they've learned in the armed services make them really ideal candidates for our operations. So how is there a way that we can create a linkage to create kind of a runway that as people serve their country in one way, we can both help them, come back in with the rest of the country, but then they can continue to serve it in terms of the manufacturing effort. Mm-hmm. Is there some way that could work together?
Yes, there is. I'm really glad you raised that, but we have to do more. But you hit the key component. I'll talk about a program related to what you just said that I think is important. But what I just heard from you, as you said, this is more pre-COVID, and it'll be after COVID too, because we're just focused on this. But as I traveled around the state, and I'm blessed to be able to visit all of Phil's facilities like the ones you represent, and I love going to see exactly what you do. But the one thing I heard over and over again is that we have job openings, but we just don't have folks with the right skills that actually fit the job opening. So there's just this disconnect that we've got to really focus on. And if you look at and then to me, that's something where government has to fill some of that gap. That's what this National Institute of Manufacturing is. Okay, how do we work to help you find quality workers that with the right skills, and what sort of help should we be giving through the training process and through skill development? And if you look at and this has been a real problem that I've been focused on for a while, is that if you look at how much the federal government helps folks who want to go on to get a 4-year degree or a 2-year degree, there's a lot of money. There's billions and billions of dollars. And yet folks who may not want that path for themselves, they want to just get skills or enhance the skills they have now in training, it's like 1/5 the amount of money we put into that, even though it represents roughly 60% of the American population. It makes no sense. That we've got to invest in people to have the skills that you need and our country needs to go forward and expand those programs. I have been particularly focused on returning veterans who are coming back off of active duty. I served in the Navy Reserve, and I agree with you. I served with some of the most patriotic people you've ever met, and they're hardworking and they're disciplined and they're great employees when they come back. And so I just recently actually passed legislation that's been signed into law by the president now to expand the opportunities for veterans coming off of active duty and use the GI Bill in a way to get training and apprenticeship programs, registered apprenticeship programs, which will train them to work at your plant and other places. So right now, I think most people don't realize the GI Bill will help veterans in that situation. Many people equate the GI Bill to help you to get through college, which it does, and it's great, and we want to keep supporting that. But if you choose not to go to college and you want to have an apprenticeship, the problem for a lot of returning service members is, especially if they've been in a while, they're older, they have a family, they have cost, and if you go into an apprenticeship program, you don't make a lot of money. It's tough until you get your journeyman card, until you get more skills. But the GI Bill helps them. It'll actually pay some of their housing expenses. It pays the food assistance. And then it phases out over a few years as they advance in their apprenticeship and become journeymen or work in your business and are making more money. And then they're up on their own. So the legislation I put forward expands eligibility because curious, and there was no good explanation, but we're fixing it, and which is why I put the bill forward. Was that in Michigan there are 1,100 registered apprenticeship programs in Michigan, 1,100 that have gone through the process. So there's training aspect of it plus job or work on the job training. But in order to use the GI Bill, it had to be approved by the VA, and only 100 of those apprenticeships actually qualified for GI benefits. So long and short, my business changes that. We're going to get it so all 1,100 apprenticeship programs, and those that'll be created, if you create one within your business too, that's DOL approved, then you can bring in veterans and they can use their GI Bill benefits to get started and to learn that craft. I met with a gentleman as I was rolling this out, and after we passed it up in Saginaw, he was a pipe fitter, and he was an ex-Marine, or I guess you're always a Marine. I take that back. He was a Marine. And he said, I wanted to become a pipe fitter, but I have a wife and 2 kids. It's like, I couldn't do this coming out of the Marine Corps, but now I can use the GI Bill. And he was excited. He was, going out and doing the work. Those are the kinds of programs I'm going to work to continue to make even more robust. So we bring folks back from the military to work in your place and other places as well, while we also expand programs to make sure everybody has access to the kind of training programs that will lead directly to good paying jobs like you offer at your place, but they got to have the right skills. But you got my commitment to keep working on that.
That's fantastic. We really appreciate it. I think as much as the COVID crisis is the kind of the short term, we got to think for the long term. And I think it's going to take programs like that to do it. And well, I'd love to tap into that pipeline, and if you love you a chance to show you what we do. And it's So I think within, especially the companies involved, I think a lot of similar folks, people have similar challenges to what we do. And as we move forward, we'd like to see how we can help everybody grow with it and grow together.
That's great. Well, I'll look forward to working with you, Mark. Thanks for sharing that. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Senator, of course, for your time. We do have to wrap up now at the minute. And so I want to, again, thank you for your time, your staff especially that work so hard to help bring this together. And we feel so strongly the business of chemistry is a solutions provider, not only of the products and innovations we make, but we also need to be part of the solutions on the policy side. And that means engaging in the conversation to make, a better place for everybody to live and work and play. And we're so committed to doing that in Michigan and working with you in Washington, the Congress, to make that happen. So on behalf of everybody, we appreciate your service to our country, to our state, and we would be glad to be a resource for you in any way, as so many folks have discussed. So we look forward to seeing you around again, and for everybody, have a very great, safe rest of your day.
Great. Thank you, John. Everybody, I really appreciate being with you. Stay safe, stay healthy. I'll look forward to working with you. Take care.
Thank you.
Senator.
We appreciate your time.